My bosses were a different generation than I was, and we didn't see the world the same way. And because of that, we had a lot of conflict.
So why is it important today in the workplace for people to be able to communicate across generations?
That's a really great question. What we find is that generations are like a language. If you don't speak the language of somebody else that you're speaking with, it doesn't matter what information you have, you really can't convey to them what you're trying to explain. Different generations have different perspectives, and we have to look at it that way. It's like a different language. If you spoke Chinese and I spoke English, we couldn't communicate with each other. Generations have the same type of an issue. They see the world from very different perspectives, or different rose-colored glasses. And so when we understand the way that generations see the world, we can communicate with them in a way that they best assimilate information, not the way that we best give it. And that's a real key factor in helping generations understand each other. Realize that different people have different perspectives, and the way that we bring our communication up is by meeting those different perspectives, or at least finding them where they are and trying to communicate in a way that they understand.
Do younger people really have a different language and a different worldview? And if so, why?
They really do, and why? It's because they grew up in a different time frame. It's like this: if I was to look at somebody that was 75, my father, one of his stars when he was younger was Roy Rogers. Well, look at somebody that's younger now, that's say 15 or 20, maybe their hero or star in the movies would have been somebody like the Terminator. Very different perspectives and very different views on the world. So yeah, people do see things very differently, and that's really one of the big keys that we have to understanding generations is that they grew up in different times. So they have different shared experiences, and that's what brings these groups together, or what I like to call value populations, is their shared experiences. Shared experiences give shared values.
What's the most important piece of advice you can give us about communicating and engaging with people across generations?
That's a great question. And one thing that we have to really realize is for us to engage with someone, we have to understand the perspectives from which they see the world. One of the most important things we have to consider about engaging different generations is finding a place where we can find a perspective from which they are coming from. How do they see the world? If you don't understand the way that somebody sees the world, it's really hard for you to engage with them because you really don't have a common ground. So once we find a common ground with them, we can actually engage in a way that communication works very effectively. The other part is when we see and understand how people see the world, we can kind of understand the emotional triggers that cause them to behave the way they do and to see the world that way. So it's a real key factor to understand this so that we can understand their emotional triggers and allow us to communicate in a more effective way.
How do you hope that the UCF faculty, staff, and students will use what you've taught us today?
That's great. It's frustrating for me is when you come in and give great information out, but you don't give people a way to actually use that information effectively. For me, the most important thing, I think, is to use this information and realize that this is an important part of diversity and inclusion. That generational differences, while we kind of think we know what they're all about, they're often hidden in plain sight because we all kind of think we're the same, but we're really not the same. So for me, it's really important that people realize that this is a major part of diversity and inclusion, and they use this information to help be more inclusive within the environment based on generations. I would also like to see it used more effectively in places like learning how to handle patient care more effectively, and to communicate with the community more effectively. How can we communicate in ways that they best understand what we're trying to come across with? So it matters whether you're a faculty member, whether you're a student, whether you're an alumni. All of this is important because part of the reputation and the image of the College of Medicine has to do with understanding generational differences.
Thank you, Ken, for being here at the College of Medicine today, being our first speaker in our Central Florida Diversity Learning Series, Lunch and Learn series. So thank you for being here.
Oh, you're welcome. It's been my pleasure.